Hello, my name is Taylor Curry, and today we will be talking about voting rights in the state of Arizona. The results of the 2020 presidential election have been a source of much strife and division across the country in the weeks and months following the election last November. A poll conducted by Politico in the week after the election found that 70% of Republicans do not believe the election was, quote, free and fair. Of that group, 78% of them believe mail-in voting led to widespread voter fraud. In Arizona, a historically red state that flipped and went blue, the election results have been challenged multiple times, and a wave of controversial bills pertaining to voter rights and voting accessibility have flooded the Arizona state legislature. Additionally, as of May 2021, audits of the election results are still underway in Maricopa County. Thomas Volge, a professor of political science and the former mayor of the city of Tucson, offered his perspective on this new wave of efforts by the Arizona state legislature.
No one cared about the election integrity issue 2 years ago because there isn't much of an election integrity issue. If there were, you would find hundreds of cases where people committed fraud during the election. There are no cases. A small handful of cases. Almost all of them that were prosecuted turned out to be Republican operatives manipulating somebody's vote. And even those were incredibly few and far between. If this is anything, it's got to be voter suppression. There isn't much else to be said about it. And it's one of the great tragedies of American politics, one of three great tragedies of American politics, that actually one of the two dominant parties believes that the only way they can win is to narrow the base rather than to broaden the base. And this coordinated effort across some 15, 20 states to narrow the opportunity for people to vote is just blatant voter suppression. It's exceedingly difficult to overcome state legislation because cities like Tucson are charter state cities, meaning that we have separate from the state. There are state statutes that override our ability to do anything about it. And so we get highly limited in terms of what we can and cannot do. Is that the more you complicate the voting process, the more you run the risk of turning people off and having them stay. And I think as we've learned the hard way, narrowing the electorate rather than broadening it is a really risky proposition in democracy.
Julia Alexander, a campaign organizer for the Democratic Party of Arizona, who worked to elect Mark Kelly in Arizona, as well as Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in Georgia, offered her perspective on this issue from the perspective of an organizer.
The campaign is definitely paying a lot of attention to what they're trying to do with the voter suppression stuff. Because you saw what they just did in Georgia, horrifying. And it's because, it's all strategic. They know exactly what they're doing. Saying that you can't give voters water, they know what they're doing. We can't let them do that here because honestly, in terms of the early voting lists and stuff like that, Arizona is actually not bad. Definitely not bad when you look at places like Georgia and other places in the South and even Texas when drop boxes are one per county and stuff like that. They used a lot of the fake voter fraud allegations to build up a lot of distrust in mail-in voting. And that was obviously at first to make people doubt the results of the election, but now they're doubting the entire electoral process. And that is super, super dangerous. I actually think that with the pandemic, a lot of places were expanding mail-in voting and options when it comes to voting. And I think that that's really important because previously when it's you have to go on election day to this specific polling location. Election day is not a holiday. People have work. A lot of the time the lines can be hours long. People won't vote merely because of the inconvenience. So the fact that we had all these mail-in voting options available to us was amazing and really great. And it is safe. Mail-in voting is safe and it is not fraudulent. There has not been a proven case of widespread voter fraud ever. The rules are basically laced with a lot of little things that don't seem that significant, but they very much are. The big thing about the mail-in ballots in Arizona specifically was that they had to be received by the county recorder by the time polls close on election day. So no, you cannot put it in the mail the day before. honestly, we were advising people not to put it in the mail after 3 weeks before election day because, I mean, right now the pandemic is happening. USPS is slow. They're putting all this stuff on USPS. And then with so many ballots, they have a lot of mail. If the ballot is not in the hands of the county recorder, your vote's not going to get counted. And that's messed up. There's a lot of places that will accept it up to a week or so afterwards. And that is a much better system. But it's good that like we had drop boxes and all that kind of stuff. But there's just too many things that they make up to try to like mess with voters and make it harder for people to vote. And the problem is that people don't think that their votes matter enough to go a little bit out of their way to make it happen.
Multiple Republican organizations were contacted for their perspective on this issue. However, none replied. The Arizona State Legislature failed to pass the controversial bill SB 1485 after a GOP senator crossed party lines to vote down the bill, citing the ongoing audit in Maricopa County. SB 1485 would have removed anyone from the voter rolls who hadn't used their ballot once in the last 2 election cycles. Despite the failure to pass SB 1485, there are still over a dozen bills in the state legislature that have yet to be voted on. Going forward, this issue remains far from decided. With the 2022 midterms around the corner, the state of mail-in voting is still in question.